G'day, it's Jamie, and welcome to Where's My Yowie. Today, I'm reading an old newspaper report about a Bunyip sighting at Widgee, Queensland in 1863. So we'll get into it. This was published in the Maryborough Chronicle, Wide Bay and Burnett Advertiser on Saturday, the 25th of September, 1909, titled, "The Bunyip, Is There Such a Thing?" To the editor. Sir, in your last issue of the 14th instant, in alluding to a mysterious animal or fish supposed to be a bunyip seen by some children near Gayndah, you ask this very pertinent question. Can any of our readers throw any light upon the subject? Well, Mr. Editor, the subject of the Australian bunyip, whatever it may be, is one that hitherto I have had some diffidence in writing about, as my personal experience of it is such a peculiar and mysterious nature that although it occurred many years back, I have never satisfactorily cleared up what the thing was that I shot, whether bird, beast, fish or human being. It goes without saying that all old bushmen, in fact, all of us who are acquainted with bush lore and legends admit that there is a mysterious amphibious animal that is to be found in many of our large waterholes and lagoons. But unfortunately, no two of us seem to have seen the same animal, and each of us seems to describe something totally different from the other fellow. It is one of the regrets of my life that I have not the ready, facile pen to enable me to describe and write up some of the mysteries of the wild Australian bush. We know there are waterholes that are haunted, and that no Aborigine will on any account go near without carrying a lighted fire stick with which to frighten the devil away. Waterholes out of which neither cattle, horses, kangaroos, etc., nor birds will drink, out of which come weird, mysterious sounds. No fish seem to be able to live in them. The surface is always calm and placid. Never mind how boisterous a wind is blowing, it does not seem to ruffle it. And when you stand on the banks and look into the dark, unfathomable depths, a feeling steals over you that you must jump in and put an end to yourself. Again, there are spots or localities upon which cattle will not feed. Although they are most lovely and fertile, and many a drover knows to his cost how difficult it is to get his mob of cattle, horses or sheep to cross such a space. Then again, that mystery of mysteries, that weird wailing sound, the soughing of the night, which has been described by a modern writer as the cry of a lost soul. It is 45 years since I first heard of it, and to this day I never heard a similar sound. But a creepy, uncanny feeling steals over me, and I am almost impelled to yell out. It is only heard on calm, still, starlit nights, far away from all habitations, and always just about midnight. I had lost my way. I knew I was 40 miles from a station. Darkness was coming on. My horse had given 2 or 3 hints that he was close up, knocked up. Poor old GG, he had cheerfully carried me over 60 miles since daylight. So there was nothing for it but to camp and put in the night the best way I could. I soon had the saddle off and the hobbles on my horse, and took a couple of holes up in my belt instead of supper. Although I had matches, it was not safe to light a fire, as there might have been Aborigines in the vicinity. So I called my good old dog up, Rattier, and, as usual, used him for a pillow. From the top of a neighbouring dead tree, a jackass, in a loud discordant tones, gave forth to the night it was time for the feathered tribe to go to roost, and the furred tribe to wake up. Then I heard the sweet little Willy Wagtail, or bushman's companion, cheer up her fond good night to her mate in a neighbouring shrub, and for a time all was still. Presently the denizens of the night came forth, and that grand old gum tree under which I was lying was alive with possums. The first half hour or so were all feeding, then the nightly possum at home took place. On one of the largest limbs was a native bear, with a wee little baby bear clinging to her. She was evidently giving her baby its first lesson in climbing. On another bough were a couple of old possums having a conjugal row. Whatever the cause of the dispute was, it was soon settled by Mr. Possum grabbing Mrs. Possum by both ears with his claws and giving her a good shaking. A little higher up was a Miss Possum, a flirty lady, trying to entice a young man possum to perch beside her. But he, evidently from past experience, preferred to remain on his own bough. Watching all this little byplay, I was lulled into sleep. I awoke with a start. There was danger in the air. My hand instinctively grasped my revolver. I sat up, all my nerves alert. At the same time, the old dog took a sniff all round and gave me a look as much to say there's nothing to fear, but immediately after cocked one ear down the valley. All my senses seemed fascinated in the same direction. A creepy, uncanny feeling came over me. The old dog's hair stood up, and he quivered with excitement. Presently, away down in the valley, in a far distance, came a low, sad, weary, weird wail. Good God, what is it? It's not a human sound, although it seems as if thousands of people were around me and all sighing at the same time. I feel that it is approaching, although the sound gets louder, but with the same weary wail comes on towards me. I shake all over with fear. The old dog crouches at my feet. Nearer still it comes. I feel I must yell out. Up goes my hand as if to ward off a blow, and it has gone past, and I feel as if a huge bird had flapped me with its wing. The clank of the hobble chains on my horse as he gallops away recalls my senses. No more sleep that night. I reached the station at midday completely knocked out, and it took days to bring my nervous system its normal state. But I am forgetting the bunyip. When I was a kiddie, an elder brother was on one of my father's stations, a place called Cook-and-Doon on the Widgee River. And whenever he came home, he used to tell me about the bunyip in a lake near the head station. So that in the early 60s, when I came to Queensland, I was thoroughly convinced of its existence, and from my brother's description, had the idea that it was an animal very similar to a small donkey, the same long ears, but covered with long red hair and a very bushy long tail, of course. I at once learned about the haunted waterholes and legends about devils and soon had a practical experience of them. It was this way. With only an Aboriginal boy as a mate, I was camped out about 2 months, breaking a freshly arrived mob of cattle from Sydney side into the run. We were between two rivers, between 20 to 30 miles apart, and I camped every night as near midway between the two as possible. Every morning the boy would go one way and I the other, returning between midday and sundown, and wherever we chanced to meet, there we'd camp. We were in the thick of the Aborigines, so the boy would always watch while I slept till midnight, and then I would watch while he slept. There was one of these haunted lagoons in the vicinity, and whenever possible, I camped on its banks, my object being twofold: the chance of seeing a real bunyip and trading on the Aboriginal superstition and its possible immunity from their attack. The lagoon was more a continuous chain of waterholes, say a quarter of a mile long and in some places 150 to 200 yards wide. The water was very good, but I never saw a wild fowl of any description on it, nor could I ever see any traces of kangaroos drinking, although there were plenty in the neighbourhood. Then again, Although teeming with eels, there were no fish. Our horses drank freely at it and fed right up to the water's edge. The boy did not share the local superstition. In fact, when I mentioned the matter, he replied, "Mine think it, that one, a wooler altogether, close up like it no good," meaning it was all humbug or rot. I had a 5-chamber Dean and Adams revolving carbine, sighted to 200 yards. I knew I could depend on it up to 150 yards, as I had often killed kangaroos at that distance. In my watches, I kept one eye on the lagoon, but for 3 weeks, nothing unusual took place. Then one night, about an hour after I went on watch, suddenly something emerged from the lagoon. It was a large, dark object, and to me looked like a huge pig. It seemed to waddle towards me, and when within range, I raised my carbine. And just as I was about to fire, it literally vanished. How or where, I could not say. I was there, I'm certain. 1 second it was there, and the next it was gone. At daylight, I went to the place but could not find no trace or track of anything. For several nights, everything was quiet. Then shortly before daylight, I noticed a big ripple on the water a few feet from the bank. Then something came out, and exactly the same occurrence was repeated. Just as I was about to fire, the thing dissolved into space or nothing. By Jove, I did feel creepy. Again, I could find no tracks, so I looked upon it as a hallucination. In other words, I had allowed my imagination to run riot with my senses. I said nothing to the boy, fearing he might clear out. Several days went by. It was a beautiful night, one of those clear, starry, dreamy evenings that always sets one's thoughts to wool gathering. I was sitting down with my back to a tree, carbine ready for instant use. My old dog beside me with his head resting on my leg sleeping with one eye open. I never knew him to sleep, but with one eye at a time. I got thinking. First, what an awful ass I was to give up all the pleasures and luxuries of city life and put in such a rough time as I was then doing. Then I thought of the old home so far away in New South Wales and wondered what my sisters were doing and whether they ever thought of me. Then I wondered what, but that's not worth repeating. Then I thought of poor old mother, how I had lost her when I was only a little kiddie, and wondered whether if I had the benefit of her influence and guidance, would have grown up a different and probably better man. Just then, I felt the dog's cold nose on my hand. At once, I brought my carbine to the ready, pulled the flap of my cabbage tree down to hide the glint of my eyes, and naturally looked towards the lagoon. But nothing was there. The old dog had his nose in the air. Presently he rose up on his legs and looked towards the lagoon, and there, almost in the same spot once more, the thing came out of the water and slowly waddled toward me. I waited till it was within 100 to 120 yards and fired. And there was the most unearthly, uncanny sound I ever heard. It was a cry of the most excruciating anguish. But to this day, I can feel convinced it was not the cry of a bird, beast or fish, but that of a human being. Immediately the smoke cleared, I looked, but nothing was there. And then I broke into a cold shiver and felt as if I had committed some great crime or murder. At daylight I went to the spot. There was a pool of blood, but neither the boy, who was a splendid tracker, nor myself could find the ghost of the mark, trace or track of anything. And had it not been for the evidence of the blood and the fact of one barrel of the carbine being empty, I would have been convinced that it was all a dream. It was most remarkable that the old dog could not find no track. He'd smell the blood, walk round and round, sometimes nose on the ground, sometimes in the air, then return to the blood and repeat the same thing. It was the only occasion during the many years we were mates that he failed to pick up the trail or scent. For 10 days, I watched that lagoon every day. The boy himself examined the edge of the water all round, but no track or sign could we see of anything either going in or coming out of the water. So far as I know, the incident related in your issue of the 14th is the first occasion in which this supposed amphibious animal has been seen during daylight. And it's to be regretful that means we're not taken at the time to follow up what was seen by the little girls. I'm afraid, Mr. Editor, I've taken too much of your space, but what I have related is one of my experience of my life for which I cannot account. I often think of the Bunyip and the time I was camped near the haunted lagoon, and the more I think, the further away I seem to be from a satisfactory explanation. And I'm afraid this letter, instead of throwing any light on the subject, has but more obscured it. I am, etc., N. Tooth, Rockley, Pyalba, 23rd of September, 1909. The end. Wow, that's an awesome story. That I really like that. That would have been scary as. And so he's seen it. It was like a large object that looked like a huge pig, and it started coming towards him. And he was going to shoot it, then it vanished. And then they couldn't find any tracks or anything. And then a couple of days later, same thing happened in the middle of the night. Big ripple in the water. It comes out. He went to fire at it, and it vanished again. And then the third time it came out, he let it come a bit closer and then picked his gun up and fired at it and shot it. And he said it was the most unearthly, uncanny sound he ever heard. It was a cry of the most excruciating anguish. And he said it wasn't a bird or a beast or anything, but it was that of a human being, which is like so freaky. And at daylight he went to the spot and there was a pool of blood. But him or the Aboriginal boy or the dog could not find any tracks or traces of the creature, which is like strange and crazy. And it makes you wonder what's actually happening there, whether they're like, he's hallucinating, which I doubt because of the blood, but like how's this creature vanishing into thin air? It's really interesting what's going on there. Okay, so we'll get on to the bloke that wrote this. His name is Nicholas Edward Nelson Tooth. He was born in 1844 and died in 1913, aged 68. His career was he was first a clerk at the Bank of New South Wales. Then in 1863, he went with his brother to Widgee Station, where this sighting happened. Then he leased Colan Station for a while. Then he became a stock drover for F. Bryant, agent and auctioneer at Maryborough. Then he was a farmer for 2 years at Walker's Point, Maryborough. Then he was a clerk at Walker's Foundry. And in 1878, he became senior partner at Vulcan Foundry, Maryborough, and inspector at Boring Plant, Eromanga, Western Queensland. In 1904 to 1913, he became a clerk of the Pyalba Shire Council, which is Hervey Bay. And this newspaper article that he wrote in was in 1909, so that's when he was in the Shire Council as a clerk, as a councillor. And so, like, you know, he's not making this stuff up because it would have ruined his reputation. He's also was a member of the Protest Alliance Friendly Society, was in the Chamber of Commerce, was on the hospitals board. He was a member of the board of the School of Arts and the Pastoral and Agricultural Society and the Pennsylvania Building and Investment Company. Yeah, that's a really interesting story. And like he's come forth and put his name to this, and he was a councillor in the local Shire Council. So like he's not making this up. Okay, that's it from me. I'll get back to you all next time. Bye.